Molly Brown survived the Titanic in Lifeboat 6 and spent the night demanding they go back for survivors. The quartermaster refused. One boat returned, not hers. 1,500 people died. Henry Ford didn't invent the car, he invented the price. The Model T cost so little that his own workers could buy one. Detroit became the factory of the world in a decade. Alvin York was a pacifist from Tennessee who didn't want to fight. He came home from France having single-handedly killed 28 soldiers and captured 132. He gave most of his medal money to a church. Susan B. Anthony spent 50 years fighting for the right to vote. She died 14 years before it passed. "Failure is impossible," she said in her last speech. She's right. She just doesn't live to see it. Prohibition made Al Capone $60 million a year. The federal government couldn't touch him for murder or bootlegging. They got him for taxes. The 20s roared for those who could afford to hear it. Jazz, silent film, the first radio broadcasts, the Model T on every street. A decade that felt like the future. The 20s roared for those who could afford to hear it. Jazz, silent film, a decade that felt like the future. Hollywood invented the Dream Factory. New stars, new faces, a new American mythology. Nobody was ready for what happened when a black woman walked to the podium. The stock market lost almost a third of its value in 2 days in October 1929. What followed wasn't a crash, it was a decade. The photograph Dorothea Lange took in a California migrant camp became one of the most reproduced images in American history. Florence Owens Thompson never received a cent for it. Hattie McDaniel won the Oscar for Gone with the Wind, the first black actress ever nominated. She sat at a segregated table at the edge of the room. Her acceptance speech was the best one of the night. Franklin Roosevelt hid his wheelchair from every photographer for 12 years. He governed through the Depression and a world war. No president has served more than 2 terms since. The attack on Pearl Harbor killed 2,400 Americans on a Sunday morning. Dory Miller, a black cook with no combat training, took over a gun position and kept firing. He received the Navy Cross. Fred Korematsu was born in Oakland. After Pearl Harbor, he refused to report to an internment camp. He lost in the Supreme Court. 40 years later, the conviction was overturned. He received a late apology. On D-Day, 156,000 men crossed the Channel. 4,400 died before nightfall. Most of them had never seen the ocean before. The GI Bill sent millions of veterans to college and put them in houses. It built the American middle class in 10 years. Black veterans were largely excluded by the banks, and universities meant to serve them. 2 bombs ended the war in the Pacific. 200,000 people died, most of them in seconds. The world learned something about itself it couldn't unlearn. America rebuilt Europe with $13 billion and called it the Marshall Plan. It worked. The countries that recovered fastest became the strongest buffer against the Soviet Union. The Korean War ended where it started, along the 38th parallel. 36,000 Americans died for a line that still exists. There is still no peace treaty. McCarthy saw communists in Hollywood, in universities, in the State Department. Arthur Miller wrote a play about the Salem witch trials. Everyone understood what he meant. He was subpoenaed anyway. Rosa Parks had been an NAACP secretary for years before she refused to give up her seat. It was a decision, not an accident. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted 381 days. Elvis took black music, blues, gospel, rhythm and blues, and put it on television. Chuck Berry and Little Richard wrote the language. Elvis got the covers. No country celebrates itself like America does. The 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Memorial Day, Halloween, each one a story, a myth, a family table. The Soviets launched Sputnik in October 1957. It sent back a single beeping signal. Within a year, Congress had created NASA and rewritten the science curriculum in every American school. Those who listened to the first televised presidential debate on the radio thought Nixon won. Those who watched it, Kennedy, America chooses the image. 2 parties. Never 3. Winner takes all means a third party only draws votes away. It never wins. And the president isn't directly elected. The Electoral College decides. A candidate can get more votes and still lose. It's happened. More than once. A Soviet submarine commander named Vasily Arkhipov refused to launch a nuclear torpedo during the Cuban Missile Crisis. His 2 senior officers had already said yes. The protocol required unanimity. He said no. Dallas, 12:30 p.m. The decade's confidence died with him. 250,000 people stood in the heat in front of the Lincoln Memorial. King had a different speech prepared. Mahalia Jackson called out to him from behind the stage. He set the paper down. Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act, knowing what it would cost his party in the South. A generation that grew up on civil rights, marches, and rock and roll got their draft notices. On campuses, in streets, in every major city. They said no. To the war. To the suits. To the world their parents had built. "58,000 Americans died in Vietnam without a front line or a finish line. The first war America watched on television every night. The first one a generation marched against in the streets." Katherine Johnson calculated the Apollo 11 flight path by hand. John Glenn refused to trust the computers until she had checked the numbers herself. The mission succeeded. She watched it from her desk. "400,000 people came to a farm in upstate New York called Woodstock. 3 days of rain and music and the genuine belief that the world could be different. Jimi Hendrix played the national anthem on the last morning and made it sound like a question. Muhammad Ali refused the Vietnam draft in 1967 and lost his title, his passport, and 3 years of his career. 8 years later in Zaire, he knocked out George Foreman in the 8th round. The country that had stripped him celebrated him. Nixon won the 1972 election by one of the largest margins in American history. 2 years later, he resigned rather than face impeachment. The break-in wasn't what ended him. The cover-up was. The last American helicopters left Saigon from rooftops. Thousands of Vietnamese who had worked with Americans waited below. Not all of them got out. The Second Amendment is 27 words. In most countries, a gun is a tool. In America, it means something more. The right to protect yourself from anyone, including your own government. That idea was born on the frontier, in a time when the state was an ocean away and the wilderness was right outside the door. Ronald Reagan told Americans it was morning again. Not for the unions, not for the national debt. He left office with the highest approval rating of any president since Roosevelt. Ryan White was 13 years old when his school refused to let him in. He had contracted HIV through a blood transfusion. The government had not yet said the word AIDS in public. He died in 1990, 4 months before a federal law bearing his name was signed. Between the coasts, there is a different country. Friday night football, church on Sunday, the same family on the same land for 4 generations. The America that doesn't feel represented by either coast. The Berlin Wall came down on the night of November 9, 1989. East Germans walked through checkpoints that had been killing people for 28 years. 100 hours of ground combat. CNN broadcast it live. The first war watched in real time. The questions the Gulf War raised took another decade to explode. Timothy McVeigh was a decorated Gulf War veteran. He parked a truck bomb outside the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City in April 1995. 168 dead, 19 of them children in a ground floor daycare. The enemy within. Bill Gates and Paul Allen started Microsoft in a garage in 1975. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built Apple in another one a year later. Jeff Bezos launched Amazon from a basement in Seattle. Larry Page and Sergey Brin wrote Google in a Stanford dorm room. The Monica Lewinsky story ran for 2 years as a political scandal and a late-night punchline. It took another 20 before it was also told as the story of a 22-year-old left alone with the consequences. At 8:46 on a Tuesday morning, the world divided into before and after. 2,977 people from 90 countries. A firefighter from Brooklyn ran toward the building. Nobody made him. America's longest war lasted 20 years and ended the way it started, with the Taliban in control of Afghanistan. The question of what those years accomplished has no comfortable answer. The evidence for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was wrong. Colin Powell knew the presentation was shaky when he gave it. The war lasted 8 years. The instability lasted longer. New Orleans drowned over 4 days. The levees broke. 1,800 people died. The government took 4 days to respond in force. The people who waited longest were the ones with the least to begin with. Lehman Brothers collapsed on a Monday morning in September 2008. By the following year, 8 million Americans had lost their jobs. The banks that caused the crisis received federal bailouts. No senior banker went to prison. Jesse Jackson wept in the crowd at Grant Park on election night. The son of a Kenyan economist and a woman from Kansas had just been elected President of the United States. SEAL Team 6 flew into Abbottabad on a moonless night. 40 minutes later, bin Laden was dead. It was nearly 10 years after September 11th. Jim Obergefell filed his lawsuit because he wanted his name on his husband's death certificate. John Arthur died 3 months after the case was filed. The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in Obergefell's favor. His name is in the ruling. George Floyd died on a street in Minneapolis with a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. 26 million people went into the streets. It was the largest protest movement in American history. A virus shut down the world in a matter of weeks. 1 million Americans died. The country that had invented the polio vaccine and eradicated smallpox argued about whether to get a shot. On January 6, 2021, a crowd stormed the United States Capitol. Not a foreign army. American citizens. The last time that building was attacked was 1814 by the British. The images from Kabul airport lasted 1 news cycle. The war had lasted 20 years. The withdrawal took 14 days. Roe v. Wade was 50 years of settled law until it wasn't. Norma McCorvey. Roe spent the second half of her life campaigning against the ruling she had won. The country is still fighting about it. In November 2022, a chatbot appeared that could write an essay, explain a diagnosis, and pass the bar exam. 100 million people tried it in 2 months. Nobody agreed on what it meant. Every generation of Americans has argued about who gets to cross the border. Every generation has needed the people who did. $36 trillion in debt. 2 parties that share a language and almost nothing else. The loudest argument in the room, with no answer in sight. The first former president convicted of a felony won the 2024 election. History has a sense of irony. Billions in weapons, ammunition, and aid to Ukraine, and a growing argument about how much of the world's problems is America's to solve. "250 years. From a dirt road in Philadelphia to the surface of the moon. From a ship with no names on the manifest to a black man in the White House. From 13 colonies on a thin strip of coastline to 50 states and a world that watches every move." It has never been simple. It was never supposed to be.